The land did not care who owned it. Ezra Holloway understood this better than most men. 45 years of living had taught him that the earth beneath his boots would outlast every promise ever made upon it, every vow spoken under open sky, every word whispered in the dark. The Texas prairie stretched endless before him. Pale grass burned gold by relentless sun, a few stubborn cottonwoods clinging to a dry creek bed. No grand house, no iron gates, just a modest ranch set back from the dirt road, fence posts leaning where time had worn them down, a windmill creaking soft when afternoon wind passed through. Ezra rose before dawn each morning, not from hope, from habit. His boots were cracked and faded, his shirt stiff with years of honest labor. He stepped onto the porch without looking back at the empty room behind him. The ranch greeted him the same way it always did, silent, steady, expecting nothing in return. 5 years ago, someone had stood beside him on this porch. 5 years ago, a voice had said the words he wanted to hear. "I will stay. This life is enough." 5 years ago, he had believed her. Now the chair beside him sat empty. The promise had scattered like seeds in drought, and Ezra remained. Not because he expected her return, because this was his land, his life, his burden and his freedom both. The morning sun climbed higher. Heat pressed down like a hand on his shoulders. Ezra checked the fence line first, walking slow, hammer in hand, tapping loose posts back into place. Wire cut into his palms, but he barely noticed anymore. Pain was just another companion out here, silent and familiar as his own shadow. After that came the well. The bucket rose heavy with water, rope biting against the pulley. That sound had become a kind of prayer, the only music this hard country offered. He poured carefully, never wasting a drop. Then the cattle. He kept few, enough to survive winter, not enough to invite trouble or envy. He spoke to them in low tones, more habit than need. Animals did not ask questions. They did not make promises they could not keep. When the work was done, Ezra saddled his horse and rode toward Copper Springs. The town had not changed much over the years. Same weathered storefronts, bleached pale by decades of sun. Same hitching posts worn smooth by generations of hands. Same low murmur of voices drifting from the general store like smoke from a dying fire. Ezra came for supplies, nails, salt, a length of rope, nothing more. He dismounted near the rail, tied his horse with practiced hands. The smell of dry wood and sun-warmed leather filled the air. He adjusted his hat and stepped toward the store. That was when he saw her. Lenora stood near the edge of the street, half shaded by the awning of the dry goods shop. For a moment, Ezra thought the heat was playing tricks on his tired eyes. The years folded in on themselves, like a letter read too many times. The town seemed to hold its breath. She looked different now, hair pinned back neat beneath a simple bonnet, dressed practical and clean, no dust on her hem, no calluses on her hands. But her eyes carried a weariness he did not remember, a hollow quality, as if she had learned to smile without letting it reach anywhere that mattered. Beside her stood a man who made no effort to blend into the ordinary rhythm of the street. Virgil Crane leaned against his polished wagon with practiced ease, one boot propped on the wheel, laughing loud enough for half the town to hear. His clothes were clean and pressed, his hands soft as a banker's, his horse restless and well-bred, stamping impatiently as if eager to be anywhere else. He spoke with wide gestures that claimed the air around him, telling stories about Santa Fe, about California, about fortunes waiting in places he would surely visit next. He looked like a man who had never stayed anywhere long enough to watch paint dry. Lenora turned then, as if she felt Ezra's gaze before she saw his face. Her eyes found his across the dusty street. The look that crossed her features lasted only a moment. Surprise. Then something heavier that settled behind her ribs. Her smile faltered just enough for him to notice. She held his gaze longer than courtesy required. Too long. Virgil noticed the shift in her attention. His grin faded half a second before he forced it back into place. He straightened up from the wagon, tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy that fooled no one. Well now, the dirt farmer himself. Still married to that dried-up patch of nothing? Ezra did not answer. He inclined his head toward Lenora, a nod of acknowledgement. Nothing more and nothing less. Then he turned and walked into the store without looking back. His hands were steady on the doorframe. His face revealed nothing to the curious eyes that followed him. But inside his chest, the old scar throbbed with sudden heat, sharp and unwelcome, like a wound reopened after years of believing it had healed. The ride home stretched long beneath a copper sky. Sun slipped toward the horizon like a coin dropped into deep water. Shadows grew tall across the prairie. The noise of town faded behind him until only wind remained. Ezra let his horse find its own pace along the familiar trail. Let his thoughts drift loose like tumbleweeds. Lenora's face still lingered in his mind, the way her eyes had searched his features, as if something unfinished might still be salvageable between them. He pushed the thought aside with effort. The land ahead demanded attention. It always did. The land did not care about old wounds or new ones. It only asked that you show up, that you keep working, that you do not quit. Near the far edge of his property, where grass thinned to stubble and soil turned pale and cracked, Ezra saw movement. At first he thought it was an animal, a coyote hunting early, or a stray calf wandered too far from the herd. Then she stepped into the open. A woman stood just beyond his fence line, one hand braced against a weathered post, her posture rigid but controlled. Dark hair pulled back tight against her skull, a few loose strands catching the dying light like threads of shadow. Her clothes marked her immediately, earth-toned fabric worn thin but carefully mended, dust clinging to the hems. She was Apache. That much was clear from the way she held herself, from the stillness in her stance that spoke of patience learned through hardship. One sleeve was darkened with dried blood, a wound on her forearm, hastily wrapped with torn cloth, poorly tended. The angle was wrong for a fall. Someone had done this to her, someone with a blade and bad intentions. Her eyes lifted when she noticed Ezra approaching. They were dark and steady, watchful as a hawk, not pleading for help, not begging for mercy, just measuring him the way you measure a stranger in country where strangers often meant trouble. Ezra dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. He did not ask her name, did not ask why she stood bleeding at the edge of his land. The border between their worlds lay clearly marked by that sagging fence. He did not step across it. "You are near my well." His voice was low and even, no threat in it, no promise either. "Water is there if you need it." She studied him in careful silence, looking for the trap, the hidden cost, finding neither in his weathered face. Ezra turned and led his horse toward the shade of a cottonwood, drew a bucket from the well with practiced motions. The rope creaked as it rose, heavy and full. He poured water into a tin cup and set it on the ground near the fence post. Then he stepped back, giving her space, giving her choice. She waited a moment longer, testing the air itself for danger. When she finally moved, it was with the measured caution of someone who had learned that survival meant never trusting too quickly. She drank slowly, carefully, making each swallow count. When the cup was empty, Ezra refilled it without being asked, without expecting thanks. She accepted with a single nod. Not gratitude, not submission, just acknowledgement between two people who understood that words often promised more than actions could deliver. Silence stretched between them, unbroken and unhurried. The sun dipped lower. Heat eased into something bearable. Dust drifted lazy in the fading light like golden snow. Finally she spoke. "There are men looking for me." Her voice was rough, worn thin by days of running and nights without rest. "If I stay here tonight, they may come." Ezra looked at her for a long moment, at the wound on her arm still seeping through the makeshift bandage, at the way she held herself ready to run again if needed, but tired, bone-deep tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "The barn has space. I will not ask questions you do not want to answer." She studied his face with those dark, steady eyes, looking for the lie beneath the offer, the hidden price that always came with kindness from strangers. She found nothing but a man who meant exactly what he said. "Why would you help me?" Ezra turned toward the house, toward the empty porch with its single chair, the windows dark and waiting. "Because this is my land. I decide who stays and who goes. Tonight, you stay." That night, for the first time in 5 years, the ranch held more than one living soul. Morning came gray and cold with mist clinging to the low places. Ezra rose before first light as always, made coffee over the cast iron stove, black and strong enough to wake the dead. He carried a cup to the barn and set it just inside the door on an overturned crate, left a clean bandage beside it and a small jar of salve his mother had taught him to make from rendered fat and prairie herbs. Then he walked away without looking back. When he returned an hour later, the cup sat empty on the crate. The bandage was gone. She had found what she needed. She stood near the fence line now, watching the cattle move slow across the morning pasture. Her wound had been rewrapped, cleaner this time, more careful. The bleeding had stopped. They did not speak. Ezra began his work, checking posts, tightening wire where it had gone slack. She watched for a time with those patient, dark eyes. Then she bent and picked up a loose board that had fallen from the fence, carried it without a word to where the rails sagged lowest. He glanced at her. She did not look back, just held the board steady against the post while he drove nails true and deep. That was how the first day passed, in silence that asked nothing and promised nothing. The second day followed the same wordless rhythm. Coffee at dawn left where she would find it. Work through the bright morning hours. Silence between them comfortable as old boots. She learned where he kept his tools. He learned how she moved through space, quiet as shadow on stone, alert as prey that had survived too many hunts to ever relax completely. By the third day, they had developed a language that needed no words at all. She handed him the hammer before he reached for it. He set water within her reach before she had to ask. Small gestures, quiet understanding. The kind of communication that forms between people who work the same ground. By the fifth day, the wound on her arm had closed enough for her to move without wincing. Her body knew how to heal fast, had learned through hard years that staying still too long in dangerous country meant death. On the third night, Ezra sat on the porch as purple darkness swallowed the land. She appeared from the barn, hesitated at the edge of the lamplight spilling through the window, then sat on the porch steps, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to seem afraid. Just present. Above them, the sky revealed its ancient map of light, pinpricks of brightness breaking through the darkness one by one until the whole vault of heaven blazed with cold fire. Ayana. Her voice broke the stillness like a stone dropped into deep water. "That is my name." Ezra nodded once, accepting the gift of it. Ezra Holloway. Nothing more was said, nothing more was needed. On the fourth night, she told him why they hunted her. They sat on the porch again, coffee growing cold in their hands. The wind had died completely. The world felt still as held breath before a storm. "I was a guide for a merchant caravan." Her voice was flat and controlled, the voice of someone telling a story they had lived through once and then would not live through again, not for anyone. 12 wagons out of El Paso, heading north through the territory. good people, families. Ezra listened without interrupting, without pushing for details she was not ready to give. 2 weeks ago, riders came down on us at dawn, 30 men, maybe more, led by a man called Silas Thornton. Ezra knew the name. Everyone within 200 miles knew that name. A former Confederate officer who had traded his gray uniform for black deed when the war ended, building an empire of fear and blood across the borderlands, taking what he wanted, killing anyone who stood in his path. They killed everyone. Ayanna's hands tightened around the cup until her knuckles went pale. Men, women, the children screamed longest. She paused, drew a breath that shuddered only slightly. They took the goods and burned the wagons, left the bodies for coyotes to clean. Silence hung between them, heavy as smoke. I survived because I know this land better than they ever will. I hid in a ravine and covered myself with mud. Lay there for 2 days without moving while they searched. Waited until they finally gave up and rode away. Her jaw tightened. But before I ran, I found something. She reached into the small leather pouch she carried everywhere, drew out a worn leather journal, pages stained with dirt and other things darker than dirt. This was in Thornton's saddlebag. I took it while his men slept off their whiskey and their killing. Ezra opened it carefully. Names and dates filled the pages in cramped handwriting. Ranches burned with dates and locations. Families killed with body counts listed neat as inventory. Stolen goods cataloged and sold. And at the bottom of each damning entry, the same signature scrawled in black ink. S. Thornton. This is enough evidence to hang him 10 times over. Yes, if it reaches hands he has not already bought. Why not take it to Sheriff Dalton in Copper Springs? Ayanna's expression did not change, but something dark and knowing passed behind her eyes. Because Sheriff Dalton deposits Thornton's money in his pocket every month. Everyone knows it. No one dares speak against it. Ezra closed the journal, held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of the lives recorded inside. Then he handed it back to her, keeping. There is a federal judge in Fort Davis, 3 days ride east. Thornton has not managed to buy him. Not yet. I know the man. But Thornton's riders patrol every road between here and there. And I have been running too long. My body knows how to heal fast. But even fast has limits. The confession cost her something precious. Ezra could see it in the way her shoulders tightened. She was not a woman who admitted weakness easily or often. Then rest here, heal properly. When you are strong enough to make the ride, I will take you there myself. Ayanna looked at him with those dark, steady eyes. Really looked. Searching for the hidden motive, the eventual price that always came due. She found nothing but a man who said what he meant and meant what he said. On the 6th day, Ezra rode into Copper Springs again. This time Ayanna came with him. She walked beside his horse through the dusty main street, not trailing behind like a servant, not pushing ahead to prove a point. Equal in the open air, matching his pace step for step. The townspeople stopped what they were doing and stared. Conversations died mid-sentence, like candle flames pinched out. Women pulled their children close against their skirts. Men rested hands on weapons they would not quite draw. Ezra ignored them all. He had lived here 15 years. Let them look. They stopped at the general store. He went inside to purchase supplies for the journey ahead. She waited near the hitching post in plain view of everyone, standing straight with her shoulders back, eyes forward, giving away nothing of her thoughts. That was when Lenora appeared. She stood frozen across the street, market basket hanging forgotten from her arm. Her eyes moved from Ezra, emerging from the store, to Ayanna, standing calm beside his horse, and back again. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition of what she was seeing, understanding of what it meant, pain that she tried and failed to hide. Virgil Crane materialized beside her like a bad smell. His easy smile curdled when he noticed the direction of her gaze. Well, well. His voice carried deliberately across the street for everyone to hear. The hermit finally found himself some company. Did not think you had it in you, Holloway. Though I have to say, your taste in companions is questionable at best. Ezra did not respond, did not give the man the satisfaction. Ayanna turned her head, looked at Virgil with eyes cold enough to freeze water in August, held that look for exactly 1 second, then dismissed him by looking away, as if he were not worth the effort of seeing. Virgil's face reddened beneath his expensive hat. He opened his mouth to say something cutting. That was when the riders came. 4 men on trail-dusty horses emerged from the road leading south. Hard faces burned dark by sun. Gun belts worn low on their hips in the manner of men who use them often. They stopped near the saloon and swung down from their saddles with the easy confidence of predators entering territory they considered already theirs. Their leader walked to the general store porch, pulled a folded paper from his coat, and held it up for the gathering crowd to see. Looking for a woman, his voice carried across the suddenly quiet street. Apache, wounded on her left arm. She stole valuable property from my employer. Anyone providing information leading to her recovery will be generously rewarded. The rider's eyes swept slowly across the frozen townspeople, stopped when they reached Ayanna, standing straight and still beside Ezra's horse. A smile spread across his weathered face, the smile of a man who had found exactly what he was hunting. Ezra stepped forward, placed himself between the rider and Ayanna, without hurrying, without showing fear. This woman is with me. She works on my land, has for weeks now. The rider's smile did not waver. Is that so? And what might your name be, friend? Ezra Holloway. My ranch is 3 miles east of town. Everyone here knows me and my word. The rider looked around at the watching faces, farmers and merchants and craftsmen who had done honest business with Ezra Holloway for more than a decade. Men whose fences he had mended without asking payment, whose cattle he had helped round up during storms, whose children had eaten bread baked in his kitchen. No one spoke against him. No one would meet the rider's questioning gaze. The rider's smile finally thinned at the edges. Perhaps I will visit your ranch sometime soon. Ask a few questions in private. Perhaps you will. Ezra's voice was steady as bedrock. And perhaps you will learn that visitors to my land should bring better manners than you have shown here today. Tension stretched between them, tight as wire. The street held its breath. Then the rider laughed, a sound cold and sharp as breaking ice. We will meet again, Holloway. You can count on that. He mounted his horse with practiced ease. His men followed. They rode out of town at a walk that said they were in no hurry, that they would be back when it suited them. Ezra watched them disappear around the curve of the road. He knew with certainty that they would return, and soon. As he turned back toward his horse, something caught his eye that made him go still inside. Virgil Crane stood near the saloon side door. Speaking low and urgent with one of Thornton's riders who had lingered behind, the man handed Virgil something small, a coin purse from the weight of it. Virgil tucked it into his coat without bothering to count the contents. He laughed at something the rider said, gestured casually toward the east road, toward Ezra's ranch, toward Ayanna. He had not noticed Ezra watching from across the street, but Ezra had seen enough to understand. Virgil Crane was not merely a coward who ran from difficulty. He was a man who sold information for comfort, who traded lives for coins. And he had just told Thornton's men exactly where to find their quarry. They rode hard back to the ranch. No words were needed. Ayanna had seen the exchange too, had understood its meaning just as clearly. They will come tonight, maybe tomorrow, but soon. Ezra nodded as he dismounted in front of the barn. Then we prepare, and we do not run. They spent what remained of daylight getting ready. Ezra checked his Winchester rifle. loaded his Colt revolver, filled every water bucket he owned, and placed them around the house in case of fire. Ayanna helped without being asked or directed. She knew what was coming, had survived it before. "You could hand me over to them." She said it quietly as they worked, a statement of fact, not a plea. "Keep your land. Keep your life. This is not your fight." Ezra stopped what he was doing, looked at her directly. "This is my land. What happens on it is my fight. You are standing on my ground. That makes it my business." Ayanna held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. The matter was settled. They finished their preparations as the sun bled red across the western sky. They came on the seventh night. Ezra had been sitting in darkness by the window for 3 hours when he heard the horses. Distant at first, then growing closer, the sound of many hooves on hard-packed earth. He rose without hurry, checked his rifle one final time, moved to his position by the front window. Ayanna crouched by the back door, her borrowed rifle steady in her hands, her face calm as still water. 6 riders emerged from the darkness and stopped 50 yards from the house. Torches flickered in their hands like angry stars brought down to earth. In the center of the group sat a man older than the others, gray hair showing beneath a black hat, face carved deep by years of cruelty and command. Silas Thornton himself. He had come personally because too many of his men had already failed, because some things a man had to see done with his own eyes. "Ezra Holloway," his voice carried across the night loud and confident. "You have something that belongs to me. Give it up now. Walk away with your life. I bear you no grudge for protecting what you thought was yours." Ezra's hands tightened on his rifle. He thought about everything he had built here, the years of labor, the seasons of drought and flood and recovery, everything he stood to lose in the next few minutes. Then he thought about the empty chair on his porch, the promises that had scattered like dust, the 5 years he had spent waiting for someone who was never coming back. He was done waiting, done letting other men decide his fate. "She is standing on my land." His voice rang clear in the darkness. "What happens on my land is my concern. You want her, you come through me first." Thornton's confident smile vanished like a snuffed candle. "So be it. Burn him out." Gunfire shattered the silence of the night. Ezra ducked as bullets punched through the window frame. Glass exploded inward. Wood splintered and flew. He rose just enough to aim and squeeze the trigger. Saw one rider jerk backward and tumble from his horse into the dust. Return fire hammered the front of the house. He crawled to another window as bullets chewed the wall behind him. At the back door, Ayanna's rifle cracked twice in quick succession. A scream cut short outside. Then another shot. 2 down. Her voice carried calm and clear above the chaos. 3 still moving, plus Thornton. A torch sailed through the shattered front window, trailing sparks. Landed on the dry wooden floor and caught immediately. Orange flames began licking up the wall, then another torch, and another. Smoke began filling the room faster than Ezra could breathe. His eyes stung, his lungs burned. Through the haze, he could see more riders circling, looking for angles, looking for weakness. This is how it ends, he thought, burned out like a rat in a hole. Then new gunfire erupted from somewhere in the darkness, not aimed at the house, aimed at Thornton's men. 3 riders fell from their saddles before they understood what was happening. A 4th wheeled his horse in panic, only to take a bullet in the shoulder that spun him to the ground. What in hellfire? Thornton jerked his horse around, searching the shadows for this new threat. Figures emerged from the darkness of the prairie. Men on horseback carrying weapons that had seen hard use. Old Whitmore with his ancient Spencer rifle that he had carried through the war. Young Dawson gripping his father's cavalry sword. The Miller brothers with shotguns older than their children. Holloway has been helping us for 15 years. Whitmore's voice boomed across the chaos. Fixed our fences when we could not pay him. Found our cattle when they strayed. Shared his water when our wells ran dry. You think we would let him burn alone? Thornton counted the odds with a practiced eye. 6 of his men down or dying. 8 more guns facing him from the darkness. And Holloway still standing in the doorway of his burning house. Rifle leveled steady at Thornton's chest. The flames reflected in Thornton's eyes as he calculated his chances. Found them wanting. This is not finished. His voice was thick with promised violence. Next time I will bring enough men to bury this whole territory. There will be no next time. Ezra's voice carried flat and final through the smoke. Ride out now, or we end everything here. Your choice. Make it fast. For a long moment, Thornton sat motionless on his horse, pride and survival warring behind his cold eyes. Survival won. He jerked his horse around and spurred hard into the darkness. His remaining men followed. The sound of their hooves faded until only silence remained. Whitmore dismounted and walked to where Ezra stood coughing in the smoke. Looked at the flames still licking at the house. The bullet holes stitched across the walls. You all right? Ezra nodded slowly, drew clean air into his burning lungs. I will be. Thanks to you. Whitmore shrugged like it was nothing. Saw the riders pass my land at dusk. 6 men carrying torches and heading east. Toward your place. Sent my boy to warn the millers. Dawson saw the flames from 3 miles off. He spat into the dust. In this country, you do not wait for an invitation to help a neighbor. You just show up. They saved the house. The neighbors formed a bucket line from the well, while Ezra and Ayanna beat back the flames with wet blankets. By the time gray dawn touched the horizon, the fire was dead. The walls were scorched and blackened. Half the furniture was ruined, but the structure stood. One of the Miller boys had taken a bullet graze to his arm. Nothing serious. Ayanna cleaned and wrapped it with steady hands while his mother watched with something that might have been gratitude if she had allowed herself to feel it. The next morning, Ezra and Ayanna rode east for Fort Davis. They traveled 3 hard days through rough country, slept in short shifts, watched the horizon for riders that never came. Thornton had retreated to lick his wounds. For now. The federal judge was a man named Harlan Stone, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed and hungry for justice in a territory that had too little of it. He listened to Ayanna's testimony without interruption, studied the journal page by page, asked questions that cut to the bone. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. This is enough to hang Thornton and half his gang. I will issue warrants before sundown. The trial lasted 3 days. 12 men sat in judgment. Ranchers and farmers and townsmen. Men who had lost neighbors to Thornton's raids. Men who had buried friends and family because of his greed. Ayanna testified with her voice steady and her eyes fixed on Thornton's face across the courtroom. She told them about the caravan, about the screaming that seemed to last for hours, about the bodies left for scavengers. The journal was entered as evidence. Page after page of murder document in Thornton's own cramped handwriting, his signature at the bottom of each entry, like a confession written in advance. The jury deliberated for less than 1 hour, guilty on all counts. They hanged him on a Tuesday morning beneath a gray sky with cold wind blowing down from the north. Ezra did not attend. He had fences to repair and a house to rebuild. But Ayanna went. She stood in the front row of the watching crowd, kept her eyes on Thornton's face as they fitted the noose around his neck, watched until the trap door fell, watched until the rope went taut and the body stopped its terrible dance. Then she walked away without looking back, returned to the ranch, to the man who had given her shelter when the whole world wanted her dead. Some debts could never be repaid with words or money. They could only be honored through presence, through staying. 1 week after the hanging, Lenora came. She stood by the fence line in late afternoon light. Same spot where Ayana had first appeared what seemed like a lifetime ago. Same uncertain posture. Same searching eyes looking for something she had lost and could not name. Virgil Crane was gone, had packed his wagon the morning after the gunfight and driven away before full sunrise. Heading for California, he claimed, or Oregon, or wherever men like him fled when their comfortable lives collapsed around them. He had not said goodbye to Lenora, had not even looked back. She told Ezra about it without self-pity, without asking for sympathy she had not earned. He left, like I always knew he would if things got difficult. Ezra stood on his porch, hammer in hand. He had been repairing the railing scorched by fire. He set the tool aside and walked to the fence. I heard. I was a fool, Ezra. Her voice cracked on his name. 5 years ago, I was a fool who wanted easy instead of true. He said nothing, waited for her to finish. I thought I wanted something brighter than what you offered, something that moved and sparkled instead of standing still. I did not understand that easy breaks when you lean on it, that bright fades to nothing when the sun goes down. She stepped closer to the fence. Her fingers gripped the top rail. You stayed. Through everything, you stayed. I see that now. I see what it means. Ezra looked at her for a long moment, at the woman he had once loved deeply enough to plan a future around, the woman he had waited for through 5 empty, bitter years. He searched inside himself for anger, for bitterness, for the satisfaction of watching her realize what she had thrown away. He found only quiet peace. I am not angry with you, Lenora. Never was, really. And I do not carry grudges. They are too heavy for a man working alone. Hope flickered in her tired eyes. But I do not stand waiting to be chosen anymore. That man died somewhere in the last 5 years. The man standing here now, he moves forward. He does not look back. The hope in her eyes guttered and went dark. Is it because of her? The Apache woman? Ezra shook his head slowly. No, it is because of me. Because I finally learned that waiting for someone to choose you is just another way of not choosing yourself. Lenora closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears cut clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. I understand. I think I knew before I came. I just needed to hear you say it. She looked at him one last time. Really looked, seeing the man he had become instead of the man she remembered. You were never not enough, Ezra. I was just too foolish and too young to see what enough looked like. She released the fence rail, stepped back. I will go east, find my sister in Kansas, start over if she will have me. I hope you find what you are looking for, Lenora. I genuinely do. She managed a small, sad smile. I am glad you did not break, Ezra Holloway, even if it means I do not belong here anymore. Then she turned and walked away without looking back. Her figure grew smaller against the endless land. The dust swallowed her footsteps just as it had once swallowed her promises. Ezra watched until she disappeared beyond the rise where the road bent toward town. Then he picked up his hammer and went back to work. That night, Ayana sat beside him on the porch. The sky above them blazed with more stars than any man could count in a lifetime. The same ancient lights that had watched over this land for 1,000 generations. The same lights that would watch for 1,000 more. They sat in comfortable silence for a long while. 2 cups of coffee cooling between them. You could leave now. Ezra's voice was quiet, not pushing, just offering. Thornton is dead, his gang scattered. No one is hunting you anymore. You are free to go wherever you want. Ayana looked out at the prairie, at the new fence posts standing straight and true against the horizon, at the rebuilt barn still sweet with the smell of fresh-cut lumber, at the land that had tested them both and found them worthy. I know. Silence stretched between them, comfortable as an old blanket. But I have been running for a long time, longer than just these last weeks. running since I was young, always looking for a place that felt like it could hold me. She turned to look at him. This feels like that place. Ezra almost smiled. The closest he had come in years. There is more fencing that needs mending, and the south pasture has not been worked in months. I noticed. Winter comes hard in this country. Extra hands make the difference between surviving and just barely making it. She nodded slowly. I have lived through harder winters than this land has seen. Then we understand each other. He poured fresh coffee into both cups, set hers within reach without making a production of it. She accepted without unnecessary thanks. Somewhere beyond the hills, wild dogs sang their hunting song, the prairie's night chorus rising and falling like breath. What happens now? Her question hung in the air between them. Ezra thought about everything that had led to this moment, the waiting, the loss, the slow, hard work of letting go, the unexpected gift of finding someone who understood without needing explanations. Now we stay, we work, we see what grows. Ayana nodded. That was enough, more than enough. They sat there until the stars wheeled overhead and the moon rose pale and full above the eastern hills. Not touching, not needing to. Just two people who had found something neither had been searching for. In this hard country where everyone eventually passed through on their way to somewhere else, they had chosen to remain. Not because anyone had promised them happiness, not because staying was easy or comfortable, because this was where they belonged, because they had finally found ground worth standing on. The night deepened around them, cold and clear and honest as the land itself. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, a truth settled into place. In a world where everyone leaves, the ones worth keeping are not those who promise to stay. They are the ones who never needed to promise at all. The story continues. Spring returns to the borderlands, and with it, Ayana brings troubling news. Gold has been discovered in the northern hills. Already, strangers are flooding into the territory, men with hungry eyes and weapons worn loose on their hips. Men willing to kill for yellow metal pulled from the earth. Ezra Holloway thought his fighting days were finished. He was wrong.